Now, if you've been trying to buy a house in the Austin area and you're starting to feel a little discouraged and you start thinking that maybe the best solution is to wait until prices come down a little bit, my question is, do you think that strategy is going to move you closer to getting a house or further away? Stick around for this video and I'll go over some of the key components you should be aware of and help you decide whether now is a good time to buy a house in the Austin area. Let's start by talking about market value. The normal process is to look at recent comparable sales of similar houses in the same area. If we look at sales activity in a specific neighborhood for, let's say, the previous 3 months, you'll begin to see that sales prices for comparable homes tend to fall within a narrow range. Now, one house might sell for a little more because it's been recently remodeled. One might sell for a little less because there was some deferred maintenance that the owners decided they didn't want to spend any more money on to fix. But for the most part, that range of sales prices is going to give you a pretty good idea of what you could expect to sell a comparable house for. But in the market we're in now, there are two major problems using this approach. First, if a house closes today, that represents an agreement that took place 1 to 2 months earlier. Normally, when a buyer and seller come to an agreement on a house, there's a 30 to 60-day period before it actually closes. This is when the inspection is done, the appraisal is done, and the final approval happens. The second problem is that if a house goes under contract today, you won't be able to see the actual sales price for 30 to 60 days from now, when that transaction actually closes. So if you're in a market where prices are going up quickly, like we are now, it's going to be virtually impossible to accurately forecast the value of that house when the only accurate sales information you can see are agreements that took place 3 to 6 months ago. And it's also important to remember that true market value is what a buyer is willing to pay for that house today. And yes, even if they're willing to pay $100,000 more than what the house is listed for. And let's talk about that for a minute. Let's say there are 500 houses in a neighborhood, and the only accurate sales information we can see are those agreements that happened 3 to 6 months ago. But based on that sales information, the value of the homes in this neighborhood are between $350,000 and $450,000. If one house in that neighborhood sold for $525,000, it might be an anomaly or a one-off. But if 10, 20, or 30 houses in that neighborhood sell for between $500,000 and $600,000, that becomes a trend. And that trend will impact the value of the other houses in the neighborhood. Another factor you should keep in mind is the interest rate. We are at historical lows, and frankly, they can't go any lower. So if the only place for interest rates to go is up, and they will eventually, you need to be aware of how that's going to impact your buying power. For every single percentage point that mortgage rate goes up, you're going to decrease your buying power by 10%. So if you're going to decide to postpone your home search for 6 months and interest rates go up by a single percentage point, you're going to have 10% less buying power. And at the same time, the prices of the available houses go up. That gap between what you can afford and what the houses are being listed at is going to continue to grow wider and wider. Now, this is just my personal opinion, but that does not seem like a plan to move you closer to actually buying a house. Now, this graph has been passed around social media and is offered as an explanation why builders are unable to keep up with the current demand. The theory is that new building permits peaked just before the 2008 housing crash, and builders have not kept up with demand because they have never returned to those pre-crash levels. Now, part of this is true. Clearly, there was more new construction prior to the crash. And if you remember, at that same time, there were a lot of builders all across the United States with partially completed subdivisions with a lot of vacant homes. And it makes no sense whatsoever for a builder to build new houses if they have that much unsold inventory. This graph is new home sales, and you'll see that it is almost identical to the new building permits. In other words, builders respond to increased demand. Were they caught by surprise by the increased demand over the last 3 to 6 months? Yes. Will they increase the number of new building permits to respond to this increased demand? Probably so. Will we see a dramatic decrease in the price of these homes when they're able to build more? Highly unlikely. If you currently have 1 month of available inventory and a balanced market is 6 months of available inventory, you would need to have 6 times the number of houses that are currently available for sale to come anywhere close to a balanced or stabilized market, let alone get to a spot where you begin to see prices decrease. Now, I personally think that we can learn a lot about what the future might have in store for Austin by studying growth trends and the real estate market of Southern California, particularly San Diego. San Diego hit 1 million residents about 30 years ago, and that's where Austin is now. Now, the reason for the growth in both of these areas might be different, but the underlying factors of supply and demand and median household income are very similar. Let me give you something to think about. In the year 2000, the median price for a home in San Diego was $274,000, which is about where most of the northern suburbs are right now in the Austin area. 20 years later, the median price for a house in San Diego was close to $800,000. What if that was the future for Round Rock, Leander, and Georgetown 20 years from now? According to Elon Musk, Austin will be the biggest boomtown America has seen in the last 50 years, which means bigger than Southern California, bigger than Silicon Valley, and bigger than anything that happened prior to the 2008 housing crash. And if he's right, now is definitely a great time to be buying a house in the Austin area. Well, I hope this was helpful. You know, I get emails, texts, and phone calls almost every day from people who are thinking about buying or selling real estate here in the Austin area, and I would love to help you out too. If you like my video, subscribe to the channel and be sure to hit that notification bell. All of my contact information is in the video description, so don't be shy. Let's make your real estate dreams come true.